There's a moment that happens in every heated conversation. A single second where you can feel the intelligence leave the room. A boardroom in Manhattan. 12 professionals. One voice rising above the rest, saying the 5 words that will cost him everything he's worked for. I know exactly what I'm doing. 3 months later, the company loses its largest client. 6 months later, he's unemployed. 2 years later, he's still telling the same story, blaming everyone but the man in the mirror. Here's what the Stoics understood that most never will. Your words don't just reveal your thoughts. They reveal the quality of your character and the limits of your wisdom. Today, we dissect 7 phrases that separate the fool from the philosopher. And if you've said even one of them recently, you're not alone. But you might be unwise. We live in an age where everyone has a voice, but few have wisdom. Where confidence is mistaken for competence. Where the loudest person in the room is often the emptiest. The ancient Stoics called this amathia, a fundamental ignorance so deep that the person doesn't even know they're ignorant. It's not stupidity. It's worse. It's the arrogance of not knowing what you don't know. And here's the painful truth. We've all been there. That moment when you doubled down on being wrong because admitting error felt like death. That conversation where you burned a bridge with brutal honesty and called it virtue. That day you blamed circumstances for a failure that was completely within your control. The 7 phrases we're about to explore are traps, ancient patterns of thinking that enslave modern minds. Marcus Aurelius warned about them. Epictetus fought against them. Seneca lost friends to them. And if you've ever felt the sting of regret after speaking without thinking, if you've ever wondered why wisdom seems to escape you in the moments you need it most, then you need to hear this. Because the first step toward wisdom is recognizing your own foolishness. And if that truth doesn't humble you enough to stay for the next few minutes, you might be exactly who needs this most. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, ruler of the known world, wrote these words in his private journal. Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. The most powerful man on earth, a man who could have anyone executed with a word, spent his evenings writing reminders about his own character flaws. Not their mistakes, his. In 170 AD, Marcus faced a crisis. A trusted general publicly contradicted his military strategy during a war council. Every eye in the room turned to the emperor, waiting for wrath. Instead, Marcus asked a single question. What am I missing? The general explained. Marcus listened, then changed his orders. Rome won that campaign because its emperor knew something most men never learn. The smartest person in the room is the one still asking questions. This is the Stoic paradox. True strength looks like humility. Real confidence admits ignorance. Genuine wisdom welcomes correction. But the fool speaks in absolutes. The fool performs certainty. The fool confuses volume with value. And he does it using 7 specific phrases, 7 linguistic tells that mark him as surely as a scar. If these principles resonate with your pursuit of virtue, if you're here not just to watch but to become, consider subscribing to this channel, not for us, for you. Because preserving Stoic philosophy in a world drowning in noise is how we all stay anchored to what matters. Now let's return to this timeless lesson. Phrase 1, I know everything about. The moment someone claims complete knowledge, they've announced incomplete wisdom. Meet Jason, senior developer, 3 years experience, started every code review with, I know exactly how to solve this. When a junior developer suggested a different approach, Jason didn't ask why. He explained why the junior was wrong. When a new framework emerged, Jason didn't explore it. He dismissed it. Then came the project that required the new framework. Jason volunteered to lead, refused training, said his existing knowledge was enough. 12 weeks later, complete failure. Not because the technology was hard, because Jason had confused familiarity with mastery. Epictetus taught, it is impossible to begin to learn what you think you already know. Practical shift. Next time you're about to say, I know, pause. Ask, what am I assuming? What might I be missing? Replace, I know everything about X with, here's what I understand so far about X. The wise person's certainty lies not in knowing everything, but in knowing the vastness of what they don't know. Phrase 2, that's just how I am. 5 words that lock you in a prison of your own making. That's just how I am. Translation: I've decided my comfort matters more than my growth. I'm calling this surrender authenticity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But the man who says that's just how I am has surrendered that power. He's treating learned behaviors like genetic code, mistaking patterns for personality. Sarah's colleague David was chronically late, 40 minutes to meetings, 20 minutes to client presentations. His response every time, "I'm just not a clock watcher. That's who I've always been." Until the day he arrived 42 minutes late to the pitch that would have saved his career. The client left, the contract vanished, and David genuinely couldn't understand why the world wouldn't accommodate who he claimed to be. Here's the Stoic truth. Character isn't discovered. It's forged. Through daily choices, through disciplined repetition, through the hard work of becoming who you want to be rather than accepting who you are. Mental shift. Replace "that's just how I am" with "I've struggled with this pattern. I'm actively working to improve." One statement surrenders, the other empowers. Phrase 3, no offense, but the prefix that supposedly softens the blow, but actually highlights that you know you're about to hurt someone and you're choosing to do it anyway. It's not honesty, it's cruelty requesting applause. Rachel's 30th birthday, 8 friends celebrating, dessert. Then her cousin Emma, someone Rachel hadn't seen in over a year, leaned across the table and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "No offense, but are you still with Mark? I always thought you could do better. You're settling." The table went silent. Rachel's face shifted. Shock, hurt, then a forced smile. "Thanks for the input," she said quietly, then excused herself. When she returned 15 minutes later, her eyes were red. Emma genuinely didn't understand the problem. When another friend confronted her later, Emma defended herself. "I was being honest. I said no offense first. If she can't handle honest feedback, that's on her." But Emma missed the entire point. No offense doesn't prevent offense. It proves you know your words will hurt. You're not being honest. You're announcing, "I'm about to damage you, but I want credit for the warning." It's like punching someone and saying "no harm intended," while your fist is already in motion. Rachel never responded to Emma's messages after that night. When Emma complained to family about being cut off for no reason, they explained she'd humiliated Rachel publicly at her own birthday about one of her most vulnerable choices. Emma's response, "But I said no offense." The phrase reveals a fundamental misunderstanding. Honesty and cruelty aren't the same thing. You can be truthful without being tactless. Timing matters. Context matters. The recipient's emotional state matters. Seneca wrote extensively about truth-telling, but always with one condition: consideration for the person receiving it. He taught that wherever there's a human being, there's an opportunity for kindness. Truth without compassion isn't wisdom. It's cruelty wearing a virtuous mask. Before you speak, Marcus Aurelius suggested asking 3 questions. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If you can't answer yes to all 3, reconsider. And if you must share difficult truth, find a private moment, choose gentle delivery, and genuinely care about preserving the person's dignity. If you have to preface something with "no offense," you already know it's offensive. That awareness should stop you, not encourage you to forge ahead with a worthless disclaimer. Phrase 4, I'm just being honest. This phrase ends more relationships and opportunities than almost any other. It confuses bluntness with virtue and mistakes cruelty for courage. Greg managed a team of 12, built his entire leadership style around radical honesty. In department meetings, he'd criticize people's work in front of 30 colleagues. "I'm just being honest. This report is subpar. Did you even try?" When team members became visibly uncomfortable, he'd double down. "What? I'm being honest. Someone has to tell the truth around here." Within 6 months, the atmosphere became toxic. People stopped proposing new ideas because public criticism felt inevitable. 3 talented employees quit. 2 others requested transfers. But Greg saw none of this as his fault. In his mind, he was the only one brave enough to tell it like it is. Everyone else was just too sensitive. The breaking point came during a client presentation. One of Greg's team members stumbled over a technical question. Instead of stepping in to help, Greg interrupted, "Honestly, she's not prepared. I told her this might happen." The client looked uncomfortable. The team member's face went red. They lost the contract. When HR finally intervened, Greg was genuinely confused. "I was just being honest. Isn't that what good leaders do?" Here's what he never understood. Delivery matters as much as truth, maybe more. The people who weaponize honesty don't grasp that context, timing, and respect for human dignity are part of honest communication. They lack wisdom to consider impact alongside accuracy. Real honesty includes being honest about your own limitations in delivering difficult messages. It means asking, is this the right time, the right place? Am I the right person to say this? Will my delivery help or just hurt? People who hide behind "I'm just being honest" skip all these questions. They care about being right more than being helpful. Marcus Aurelius practiced what he called speaking only what you know to be true, and even then, speaking with care. The Stoics weren't against honesty. They were against careless speech that damages while claiming moral high ground. There's a massive difference between truthful feedback and thoughtless cruelty dressed up as virtue. Truth can be delivered with kindness. Can we discuss this privately? Carries the same honesty as public humiliation, but one preserves dignity and the other destroys it. I have concerns about this approach. Want to talk through them? Is honest without being brutal. Phrase 5. It's not my fault. Watch someone's growth stop completely. Just wait for them to say these 4 words repeatedly. It's not my fault the project failed. They didn't give me enough resources. It's not my fault I'm unhappy. Life dealt me a bad hand. It's not my fault the relationship ended. They were too demanding. Reflexive deflection of any personal accountability, no matter how much control you actually had. Kevin blamed external forces for everything. Missed rent deadline? The bank app was down. Dishes piled in the sink? Too stressed at work? Lost his job? Boss had it out for him from day one. 6 months of job searching. He'd get interviews, then blame the companies when offers didn't come. They asked unfair questions. The interviewer clearly didn't like me. They wanted someone with connections. One evening, Kevin came home furious. He'd been rejected after a 3rd-round interview. He'd shown up 20 minutes late because of traffic and seemed distracted because he hadn't prepared properly. But it's not my fault. Who schedules interviews during rush hour? And how was I supposed to know they'd ask technical questions? Here's the trap. When nothing is your fault, nothing is in your control. You trade temporary ego protection for permanent powerlessness. You become a victim of circumstance, unable to learn from mistakes because you refuse to acknowledge them. Every failure becomes proof that external forces control your life rather than an opportunity to adjust your approach. Epictetus divided everything into 2 categories: what's in our control and what isn't. But here's what people miss. He emphasized that our response to everything is always in our control. Traffic made you late. You couldn't control traffic, but you could have left earlier. Boss didn't like you. You couldn't control their opinion, but you could control your work quality and professional behavior. When you say, "It's not my fault," you're surrendering the one power you always have, the ability to influence outcomes through your choices. Yes, circumstances matter. Yes, unfair things happen. But your response determines whether you grow or stagnate. Instead, try this. Here's what I could have done differently. Or, that was outside my control, but here's how I'll adapt. You separate what you can't change from what you can. Then focus your energy where it actually matters. That's not self-blame, it's self-empowerment. Most people scroll for distraction. The few who pause here are searching for meaning. If you're still watching, subscribe and keep walking the Stoic way. Phrase 6. I don't care what anyone thinks. People who truly don't care what others think rarely announce it. This phrase is insecurity screaming that it's confidence. I don't care what anyone thinks about me. I do what I want. Other people's opinions don't matter. Haters gonna hate. I'm unbothered. Performative independence that paradoxically requires an audience to witness how independent you are. Lisa posted it on social media weekly. Living my life, don't care what anyone thinks. She'd make controversial statements in class, then add, I don't care if people disagree. She dressed provocatively, then loudly proclaimed she didn't care about judgment. Every declaration of indifference was public, emphatic, repeated. But watch what happened when someone actually criticized her. She'd spend hours crafting responses. She'd screenshot negative comments to show friends, explaining at length why those people were wrong. She'd post vague status updates clearly aimed at specific critics. Once, after someone questioned her opinion in a seminar, she didn't speak to them for 3 weeks. The contradiction was obvious to everyone except Lisa. If you genuinely didn't care, why check your notifications every 5 minutes? Why argue with strangers online for hours? Why bring up criticism days later unprompted? Her constant declarations of indifference were actually desperate pleas for validation disguised as strength. Senior year, she applied for a leadership position and wasn't selected. Instead of accepting it, she posted a long rant about how the decision didn't matter, because I never cared what they thought anyway. But she clearly cared intensely. She just couldn't admit it without feeling weak. Here's the truth. True indifference doesn't advertise itself. When you repeatedly announce you don't care about others' opinions, you're revealing that you care deeply. You're just trying to preemptively defend against criticism. It's armor, not confidence. The phrase itself is a response to judgment you claim doesn't affect you. The Stoics did advocate for internal validation over external approval, but they practiced it quietly through action, not declaration. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively in his private journal about not needing others' approval. Notice, private journal. He didn't proclaim his indifference in the forum. He lived it through his choices, not his announcements. Real confidence looks different. The wise care about judgment from people they respect while remaining unmoved by everyone else. That's discernment, not blanket rejection. They listen to criticism from credible sources, ignore noise from the rest, and never feel compelled to announce their stance on either. If you're truly unbothered by others' opinions, you simply live according to your values. No proclamation necessary, no defense required. You don't need to tell people you don't care. Your peace speaks for itself. Phrase 7. I never make mistakes, or I was right all along. The person who can't admit error has stopped learning. They're intellectually frozen while claiming they're perfectly evolved. I told you so. I knew I was right. I never make mistakes in this area. If they just listened to me from the beginning, none of this would have happened. Rewriting history to preserve an image of infallibility, even when the evidence of error is staring everyone in the face. Daniel had strong opinions about product direction in his startup. They launched a feature he'd insisted on for months. Users hated it. Engagement dropped. Support tickets flooded in. The data was undeniable. But Daniel wouldn't acknowledge the mistake. In the post-mortem meeting, he spent an hour explaining how the feature was actually brilliant, but users weren't ready for it yet. When shown the negative feedback, he said users didn't understand the vision. When the lead developer suggested rolling it back, Daniel said they just needed to educate the market better. He never once said, I was wrong. Instead, he constructed elaborate explanations for why his decision had actually been correct, and external factors had interfered. The problem wasn't his judgment. It was timing, user sophistication, marketing execution, anything but his core assumption. This pattern repeated for months. Every failed initiative became a lesson in how Daniel had been right, but circumstances had conspired against him. The team stopped bringing him problems because he never admitted being wrong, which meant they couldn't trust his judgment going forward. How do you know when someone's advice is sound if they claim every piece of advice they've ever given was sound? Eventually, a major client threatened to leave over an issue Daniel had dismissed as minor. When it blew up, even then he said, "I handled it correctly. They're just being unreasonable." The client left. The board asked Daniel to step down. His response, blame everyone except himself. Here's what refusing to acknowledge mistakes actually does. It stops all learning. Every error contains information, but you can't extract it from what you won't admit happened. The unwise protect their ego at the expense of their growth. The wise understand that admitting error isn't weakness. It's the only path to improvement. Marcus Aurelius constantly questioned his own judgments in his private writings. He wrote, "If anyone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake in any thought or action, I shall gladly change. For I seek the truth by which no one was ever truly harmed." This is wisdom, eager correction, not defensive preservation. When you can't admit mistakes, you guarantee you'll keep making them. You rob yourself of the feedback loop that creates expertise. Pride becomes prison. Instead, try this. "I was wrong about that. Here's what I learned." Or, "That didn't work as I expected. Let me adjust my approach." Humility that invites growth rather than ego that prevents it. These 7 phrases aren't just communication mistakes. They're windows into thinking patterns that limit growth, damage relationships, and prevent wisdom from ever taking root. Every one of these 7 phrases stems from the same root: ego protecting itself at the expense of truth, claiming complete knowledge, refusing to change, hiding cruelty behind honesty, weaponizing truth, avoiding responsibility, performing false confidence, denying mistakes. All of them prioritize comfort over growth. The Stoics understood that wisdom begins with intellectual humility, not the false humility that says, "I'm terrible at everything," but the honest recognition that you're still learning, still capable of error, still growing. Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Each time you catch yourself about to say one of these phrases, you have a choice. Continue the pattern or pause and choose differently. That pause is where wisdom lives. Epictetus was born a slave, owned, beaten, powerless. Yet he became one of history's greatest philosophers, not because circumstances changed, because he changed his mind about what he could control. He taught, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. That's the final lesson, the one most people never learn. The wise person doesn't fear looking foolish. They fear staying foolish. So they ask questions when they could assert answers. They admit ignorance when they could fake certainty. They accept correction when they could defend ego. Not because they're weak, because they understand that every word either builds your character or reveals its limits. You've spent the last 15 minutes examining 7 phrases that mark the fool. Now you have a choice. You can recognize these patterns in others and feel superior, or you can recognize them in yourself and become wiser. The Stoics didn't write so you could judge people at dinner parties. They wrote so you could build a life of virtue, wisdom, and inner peace. That work begins the next time you feel one of these phrases rising in your throat. Will you speak it, or will you choose silence and growth? The Stoics didn't speak to be admired. They spoke so we could live wiser. Subscribe to Stoic Way, not for content, for commitment. To the daily practice of choosing wisdom over ego. To the hard work of becoming better than you were yesterday. To walking the Stoic path, even when no one's watching, especially when no one's watching. Because that's where character is truly built, to stay stoic, stay wise.